What's up guys, in today's video we're going to be talking about the bombshell news that Sigma Corporation dropped on the camera industry today, and it is for their new camera, the Sigma FP. Check this out. So we're going to hop right into it, and we're going to talk about a lot of nerdy stuff in this video. We're going to get a full tech breakdown of what this camera offers and what it can do, my personal pros and cons of the camera, and whether I think that you should pre-order it immediately or whether you should spend your money elsewhere. So let's get into it. So this camera is called the Sigma FP, and the reason it is so exciting is that it has a full frame sensor built in this tiny little body that mimics a rangefinder or mirrorless body, something that could possibly be the size of the EOS M camera or even one of the Sony mirrorless size cameras, but with a full frame sensor. That's pretty incredible, right? So it is a 6000 by 4000 resolution sensor with an image ratio of 1:1, 4:3, 3:2, and 16:9. This camera offers for stills 25 megapixels, which is pretty impressive in a camera that is calling itself a cinema camera, and then also having a 25 megapixel photography option in this camera. As I mentioned before, it's a full frame sensor. It's a 35.9 by 23.9 millimeter sensor, which is full frame, and it has the BSI CMOS sensor in it, so it doesn't have that Sigma sensor that everybody has grown to love in the past in a lot of Sigma's older cameras, which for me, I've never actually seen anybody use the Sigma camera out in the wild, but apparently people loved the sensors Sigma was making. But it does have a Sony made sensor in it, which I can attest to, and at least I think half of us can agree on, that Sony makes pretty great sensors, right? Moving forward to the low light capabilities of this, I imagine that it will be pretty good in low light. It says it has an ISO range of 100 to 25,600 ISO, and it has an expandable ISO range from 6, yes, that's a single digit 6, to 102,400 ISO. So I've never heard a camera shooting single digit ISOs. If you guys know of one, shout it down in the comments, because I would love to see videos or, you know, pictures of photos shooting single digit ISOs, and even more so would love to get my hands on one and shoot with it. So to me, that's pretty odd and it's pretty crazy. So it is definitely a camera that I'm gonna want to see some footage from those single digit ISOs, if nothing else. One big drawback on this is a pretty sensitive topic, or sensitive topic number one, is it does not have IBIS. So a lot of people that are, you know, YouTubing, vlogging, and doing run and gun stuff, they want that in-body image stabilization. A lot of people that are actually making films and that sort of thing are either flying their camera on a gimbal or locking it off on sticks, and they care nothing about IBIS. And then there's the people in the middle that are just like, well, just get an image stabilized lens. I kind of live all across the board because I do all three, but personally my A6400 doesn't have IBIS. My Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K doesn't have IBIS, so I'm not really too concerned about that. If I want those smooth shots, I get an OSS lens for Sony or a stabilized lens for, you know, Blackmagic, or I just throw it on the Ronin S and I get those stable shots. So no IBIS built in here, not a big deal for me. In this you will get your, you know, raw settings for your stills or for your photo mode. You will also get the high, medium, and low quality of JPEG, and it seems like this is going to do pretty much everything that a modern DSLR, modern mirrorless camera will do in terms of photos. So I think it'll be pretty great for photos. Sensitive area number two is autofocus. This camera does have autofocus built in, but it is a sensor-based contrast autofocus system, so it's not going to be as snappy as your dual pixel autofocus that you get in your newer Canon cameras or your eye autofocus that you get in your newer Sony cameras, but it does have autofocus, and you do have 49 autofocus points there if you need them. So moving on to the front of the camera, it's pretty bare looking. I mean, it does have, you know, of course, your lens release button. It has the FP badging there, but the lens mount is what we want to talk about. It is the L mount lens mount. What that is, it is the lens alliance between Panasonic, Leica, and Sigma, and basically any three of those brands, you can use each other's lenses on the other camera bodies without having to have adapters, which is pretty awesome because that's going to save you a little bit of money. So that's really a plus in my opinion, not really a drawback. I mean, because really no matter what camera you use, normally if you want to use EF, you know, you're gonna have to get a lens adapter to use it on a Nikon camera and vice versa. So that's normally how that works on every other camera. So if anything, this is a plus, right? Moving to the back of the camera, I would say this is sensitive area number 3. Now the reason this is sensitive area is the Sigma FP has a 3.2 inch LCD fixed screen on the back of it. That's right, fixed. It does not have an articulating screen, and this is again one of those things that is going to have your YouTubers and vloggers and your filmmakers up in arms, because a lot of times your YouTubers and vloggers, they need to have an articulating screen so they can monitor themselves, and a lot of times your cinema and filmmaking type people are going to say, we don't care about an articulating screen. If you need to monitor you know, yourself, or if you need to get those lower high angles, throw a monitor on, because we're used to rigging out cameras, and or they already have existing monitors, so it doesn't really affect them. So me, I think depending on the camera, if this is your only camera, I think then that will be an issue, especially if you're shooting a lot of social media content. I think that for a camera that's sort of niche like this, that isn't pushing only a cinema camera, sort of like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K is, and some of these higher end cameras, I think a camera like this should have an articulating screen, because I think this is more geared towards your hybrid and your all-around shooters, and I think they would really appreciate that. So looking at the top of this camera, you have the power switch, and then you have the cine and still toggle button, which to me is really an in-your-face thing that is telling you that this is a hybrid camera, right? Because it uses the word cine, which to me is kind of a buzzword anymore. Cine, cinematic. It's sort of something that everybody's thrown out there in the industry to make themselves feel more special, and still, right? So this is saying, hey, this is for filmmaking. It doesn't have, like a lot of cameras, doesn't say movie, or it doesn't have the little camera. It says, hey, this is cine, this is for filmmaking, and then still, this is for photography. And then of course you have your record button, and then you have your shutter, which is not a mechanical shutter, it is an electronic shutter. To me, it makes no difference either way, honestly. And then right here on top, you see those vents. This is Sigma's new way of heat sinking their cameras. They claim that you should be able to run this all day. 4K with this new heatsink technology, and your cam won't overheat. Alright, so what we're all excited about is we're all excited for the video features, and that's probably why you're here. So let's talk about the video features. So one of the main things about this camera, like I said, is it has a full frame sensor, and it shoots raw, uncompressed cinema DNG video. One major thing about that cinema DNG is that apparently upon the launch date, you cannot view your cinema DNG files playback on the camera. Just put that in there. Put it in there before you release the camera, Sigma. Why would you do that? But the thing about it shoots 8-bit, 10-bit, and 12-bit, and Sigma claims that it shoots 12.5-bit raw uncompressed, which is great. You know, but that is something that we'll have to see when people start getting the cameras in their hand, because sometimes camera companies like to over-exaggerate their dynamic range. Although I have no reason to trust Sigma, I feel like they're telling us the truth because they make great lenses, right? But something we'll have to see. It also shoots MOV files in H.264. Then the frame rates, it does not shoot true cinema 4K, but it does shoot UHD 4K at 23.98, 25p, and 29.97. So it's got your 24, your 25, and your 30p in 4K. So it does not shoot 4K 60, which is a downside for me. It's like, come on, Sigma. Even my Osmo Pocket shoots 4K 60, so just put it in the camera. Just do it, Sigma, come on. And then Full HD, it shoots 23.98, 25p, 30p, 60p, 100p, and 119.88p. So you're gonna get that 120 super slow motion in 1080. And honestly, this is normally pretty good because most cameras now, that 1080 is so good and so crisp that you can just up-res it to 4K and it looks fine. So that's not a big issue there. One thing I'd like to point out too is when monitoring, it looks like on the back of the camera right here, it looks like you'll be able to you know, have some pro features in there, like hopefully false color, waveform, and histograms, and focus peaking and all that, which is a must if you're doing any serious filmmaking stuff. So that is great that they're including this. Down along the bottom of this, you have a tone and color button, also a mode and a playback button. And then I also like how they have the scroll wheel dial instead of like the separated little like an old school game D-pad. The scroll wheel helps me navigate through the menus a lot quicker instead of having to click those little dials every time. So I think that's a big plus in my opinion. I think the button layout looks pretty awesome. Built in are some interesting picture profiles. So of course it has your standard ones like standard, vivid, neutral, portrait, landscape, and then the dreaded monochrome that every camera manufacturer puts in their cameras. But it also has some Hollywood look type presets built in, and I find these kind of interesting. So you have cinema, sunset red, forest green, FOV classic blue, FOV classic yellow, and check this out. For all of you guys selling preset LUT packs on YouTube, Sigma's trying to put you out of business. They have included in the Sigma FP a teal and orange preset built into the camera. They're gunning for you. They're coming after you. Watch out. An interesting thing that Sigma also put in this camera is a director's viewfinder, which to me is kind of hilarious in itself because it allows you to see what it would be like to shoot with compatible cinema cameras. So basically, if you've ever seen a director on set, sometimes they use a viewfinder, right? And they can adjust the resolution in that viewfinder, and it'll, you know, show them what that resolution would be if they were shooting with the camera they have on set, so they don't have to, you know, set their camera up every time. They just look through this, basically this you know, thing that looks like an EVF or a viewfinder to compose their shots, essentially. So this has this built in, right? The cameras built into this viewfinder in the Sigma FP are Arri Cams, Airflex, Alexa LF, Alexa Mini, Sony Venice, and a multitude of Red cameras like the Monstro 8K, Helium 8K, Dragon 6K. So these are all cameras that cost 10, 20, 50 times as much as the Sigma FP. So thank you, Sigma, for showing us what it would look like to shoot on a much more expensive camera. This camera also shoots HDRI images and videos and can be generated with the camera by capturing and combining 3 frames for still pictures and 2 frames for moving pictures with different exposures using electronic shutters. So you do have the HDR option in there if you want it. I don't care anything about that moving forward. This shoots on the Sigma BP51 batteries. You can find these all day on Amazon from third-party manufacturers. So your battery issue is going to be fairly cheap, so don't worry about that. Just buy a bunch of them and you'll be good to go. This camera can record to SD cards, it can record to SDHC cards, SDXC memory cards that are UHS-2 compatible, as well as supposedly the article that I am referencing says that you can record to SSDs via a USB-C port, which to me is great. That's what I do on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, and I think that is really the wave of the future. I'm so sick of having to swap out SD cards so often. I'd rather just put an SSD on top of the camera and then just have 1 terabyte and just roll footage all day. So the biggest thing is we don't know the price yet of this camera. I believe that if Sigma could come in anywhere at the $799 mark or $899 mark, I believe they would sell a metric crap load of these, because I think that the specs on the camera look good so far on paper, and if it performs as it says, I think that this would be a great camera. So I would say the major pros of this camera are, of course, the full frame sensor. It's shooting the uncompressed raw DNG file format for video. Also, it being weather sealed. It's having a multitude of accessories already available for it. If you check out, Sigma's video, it shows all of Sigma's accessories that are ready to go, and it having the L mount to allow you to easily adapt all those other brand lenses onto this camera. Now, there are some pretty big cons, like the not shooting 4K 60. That is a big thing for me. It not shooting true cinema 4K, which is a big thing for me. It not being able to play back its cinema DNG files on camera at launch. The non-articulating screen, I believe on a camera that's niche like this, saying it's a hybrid cinema and still camera, I believe that it needs to have an articulating screen, as opposed to if it was just marketed as a cinema camera, I wouldn't care at all. So what would I do? Would I pre-order this if I had, let's say this cost $1,300, the same amount that you can buy a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera for? Would I buy one of these Sigma FP cameras? And the answer for me is no. But if this came in around what I hope that they price it at, like the $799 or even the $900 mark, I think this would be a definite buy. I think you should buy this if you do wedding cinematography, if you're into just shooting for social media and you don't really care so much about shooting films or documentaries or something like that. I think you should definitely consider this camera. But I guess it is to be determined on what the price is going to be, because to me that's going to either make or break this camera, because it really is in this weird area in an overcrowded market right now, and Blackmagic dominates. They really are dominating right now at their price point for the BMP CC 4K, and unless this is significantly cheaper, I don't really see it doing that great. But that's just my opinion. What is your opinion on this camera? Do you think it is something you're going to want to buy, try, or something you're just going to pass by? Hit the thumbs up if you like the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss any videos, and as always guys, remember, just go shoot. I'll catch you on the next one.